The mid to late 2010s is universally regarded as some of the worst years in WWE history in recent memory. This was peak Vince being out of touch era, where it seemed like the only real hot feud going on at the time was between WWE and its own fans. With no AEW at the time and TNA being a non-factor, WWE had no real competition and got complacent big time, and it showed. It really was night and day compared to today. Although you could argue that 2015 and 2016 wasn't great either, it did feel like 2017 was the beginning of an era, a run of 3 or so years where we saw some of the worst WWE had to offer and the argument of Vince needing to go becoming more and more apparent. So in this video, let's take a look back and relive some of the good, the bad and the ugly that WWE served up to us in 2017. Let's kick off with the good, of which there might not have been too much, but there were a few things that were excellent. First of which was all things Samoa Joe after his debut on the main roster. Might be biased here being a huge fan of his, but Samoa Joe is one of those rare guys that can overcome even the worst of booking. In early 2017, Samoa Joe, after killing it in NXT, debuted on the main roster. He made a surprise debut on Raw after the Royal Rumble, attacking Seth Rollins doing the dirty work for Triple H, so immediately he was in the mix with the top guys and someone to take seriously. Unfortunately, he did legit injure Seth Rollins on his first night on Raw, but that played into their feud as they would go on to face each other at Payback a few months later. Samoa Joe's summer months of 2017 would consist of pursuing the Universal Championship. He won a great number 1 contenders 5-way match at Extreme Rules to set up a dream match with Lesnar for the title at the July pay-per-view, Great Balls of Fire. Yes, that was an actual name of a pay-per-view in 2017. Before this match, he cut these great promos on Lesnar and had these amazing brawls with him on Raw. Just felt like in a long time Lesnar had a real challenger and someone equally as tough who wasn't afraid of him. But unfortunately, the match didn't live up to the hype and Joe lost in what was a typical Lesnar match at the time. Big moves, F5 and pin. Joe did get another crack at the title at SummerSlam in a 4-way, which was disappointingly won by Lesnar again. It just felt like Joe was ready at this point to win the big one. To have him win the title would have truly taken him to that next level, but it wasn't to be. However, the July 10th Raw building up SummerSlam, there was this promo segment between Joe, Roman and Lesnar where Joe absolutely stole the show.
You see that? You see that? That's your advocate. That's the man who knows you better than anyone.
He did this amazing promo during at one point it appeared Lesnar actually got pissed off for real and was ready to throw down, and Joe was there all the way. Joe proved once again how there's very few better on the mic than him. Would recommend watching this back. Unfortunately, Joe would later get an injury until October that year, where after Survivor Series he would be in feuds with the members of the Shield. He came up short again when he challenged Roman Reigns for the IC title. Just felt like whatever the creative, Samoa Joe came across like a true main event star throughout 2017 and was a real shining light in the middle of a bunch of garbage. Speaking of shining lights, another one during 2017 was AJ Styles. After debuting the year before, it felt like AJ really got into the groove in WWE and was easily one of the best wrestlers in the world at the time. He started off the year as WWE champion in a feud with John Cena where they put on an absolute clinic at the Royal Rumble event. Fast forwarding to WrestleMania season, he was in a feud with Shane McMahon, and surprisingly their match at WrestleMania was pretty good. I think we know who deserves the credit for that. After that, AJ was now a babyface and in the hunt of the US title held by Kevin Owens. This is where we saw some hot potato being played with the title and this one awkward moment. AJ had already lost to Owens at Backlash and faced him again for the US title a few months later at Battleground. However, a few days before their match on the pay-per-view, AJ beat Owens for the title at a house show at MSG and was now the champion going into their match. Then at the pay-per-view, Owens won the title back from AJ, where it appeared we had this botched finish where Owens pinned AJ and the ref did a very slow and hesitant 3 count. The crowd and everyone were confused as it appeared AJ had missed his cue to kick out. WWE barely showed any replays and the late betting gods, which are always pretty much right, had AJ as the winner. AJ was visibly upset after the match and Fightful reported that this was indeed a screw-up. 2 days later on SmackDown, Owens lost the title again to AJ in a 3-way which saw the return of Chris Jericho. AJ and KO would face each other again 2 more times on SummerSlam and SmackDown, with AJ winning both. After AJ dropped the US title, he was on to bigger and better things as he won the WWE title from Jinder Mahal, don't worry, more on him later, in a historic moment on SmackDown in Manchester, England. At the time, Jinder was set to face Lesnar at Survivor Series in the traditional Raw Champion vs SmackDown Champion match, but Lesnar apparently heard that and said, "That doesn't work for me, brother." Lesnar didn't want to work with Jinder, and so that led to this historic moment, the first ever WWE title change outside North America according to WWE. Styles would go on to remain WWE champion for the rest of the year. Similar to Samoa Joe, AJ was a real standout in 2017, especially inside the ring. Moving on, one of the most entertaining segments of the year came in the form of the Festival of Friendship presented by Chris Jericho. At this time, Chris Jericho was doing his list of Jericho shtick, where he would carry around a notepad and write down the name of people who annoy him. This was great. At the same time, he was teaming up with Kevin Owens. They were so entertaining together and had great chemistry. Together they were Universal and US champions at one point. But cracks in their relationship began to form, and so to fix this, Jericho hosted this Festival of Friendship, which was a celebration of their friendship. This featured showgirls, music, and gifts from Chris to Owens to show how much he appreciated him. We even got to see the return of Goldberg. Chris gifted KO a piece of art which symbolized their friendship and also hired a magician, but Owens wasn't impressed. And then came the best moment when KO told Chris he too had a gift for him. As an eager and excited Chris opened it up, he saw and happily shared with the world that it was a brand new list of Jericho notepad. But then came the infamous line from Chris as he concerningly said, "How come my name's on this?" And as he slowly lifted it up, we all saw at the back of it and it said the list of KO. Owens' facial expression then changes and boom, he attacked Chris and the heel Kevin Owens was born and this feud was off to the races. Words can't do this justice, it's one of those segments you must revisit to truly appreciate. Apparently Jericho later revealed that Triple H felt this segment would be too goofy and planned to axe it from the show, but Chris fought to keep it in, a rare standout segment from Raw during 2017. But speaking of standout moments from 2017, very few can top the Hardys' surprise return to WWE at WrestleMania 33. I mean, if you talk about gigantic pops from the crowd in recent years, this is easily in that conversation. At WrestleMania 33, there was a multi-team ladder match for the tag team titles. After initially being announced as a 3-team match, the New Day, who were the hosts of that WrestleMania, came out in their wrestling gear and said there was another team added to the match last minute. After teasing it was going to be them, the classic Hardy Boys theme song hit and the crowd exploded. It was an insane reaction. Not only was this reaction huge because we hadn't seen the Hardys in WWE for about 7 or 8 years, but during this time Matt and Jeff were doing their Broken gimmick, which was amazing and honestly the best thing to happen in TNA since forever. Broken Matt Hardy bleached part of his hair, adopted a strange and sophisticated accent, and referred to Jeff as Brother Nero. This is honestly so hard to describe. In early 2017, around this time, they were also doing this Expedition of Gold where they would teleport in their minds to different promotions and win their tag team titles. We wouldn't have thought that this would have included WWE as well though. There was some chance for them in the crowd, but to many this was genuinely a surprise. Only the night before, they were in a ladder match against the Young Bucks at a Ring of Honor pay-per-view. The Broken gimmick was so entertaining, and so we were all super intrigued to see which Hardys we'd be seeing in WWE. Jeff came out as normal, but Matt Hardy appeared to be a version of his Broken self, with a few teasers of his delete chants. They went on to win the match at WrestleMania and become tag team champs, completing their expedition. It was an amazing moment. After this, we really didn't get to see the full Broken gimmick, as the Hardys were in a near year-long battle with TNA, who claimed they owned the gimmick and it was their trademark. Matt would tease a few delete chants here and there, but it wasn't the full thing. But in early 2018, TNA finally gave in and gave all ownership of the gimmick to Matt, and so we then saw Woken Matt Hardy, which was WWE's version of the gimmick. Struggling to think of any bigger or better crowd reaction in 2017 than this moment. Before we get to the bad stuff of 2017, here's a few quick special mentions of a few more positives. Firstly, Braun Strowman in 2017 was over AF. If there's one thing we know about Vince McMahon going back decades, is that he loves a big, tall, meaty guy. Yep, who doesn't, right? 2017 was really the year of Braun Strowman and his introduction as a top singles guy. Breaking out of the Wyatt family and becoming a top babyface, we would see him do some crazy things like flipping over ambulances and breaking the ring suplexing the Big Show. These feats of strength and dominance really got him over to a point where he was one of the most popular guys on the main roster. Next up is NXT, during which this period was on fire thanks to Triple H. The Undisputed Era was on top and many felt NXT was so much better than the main roster. Moving on, next up is the Fashion Files, which is a personal favourite of mine. In 2017, Fandango and Tyler Breeze became one of the most entertaining acts on SmackDown thanks to their comedic Fashion Files segments. They called themselves the Fashion Police, and these segments parodied a sort of early 2000s detective show. It was great, and again, you need to look it up to fully appreciate it. Finally, the last positive shout out has to be the Usos versus the New Day feud throughout the year. Their rivalry was one of the best tag feuds in years. Their matches, particularly the Hell in a Cell match, was great. They even had a fun rap battle in which a certain Xavier Woods got cooked, as the kids say. But that concludes the good. Now let's move on to the juicy bits and look at some of the bad from WWE in 2017, of which there was plenty to choose from. Here are a few that stood out. First up is the Roman Reigns push and push back. It feels like Roman Reigns can be a topic on his own every year during this period. Most fans know the deal by now. Roman was clearly picked as the face of the company by WWE, and the fans weren't having it at this point. In turn, as much as the fans rejected him, WWE were equally as determined to push him as the top guy regardless. He felt like a pawn in the constant WWE versus its own fans feud that was in full effect by this point. By 2017, the push had been going on for a few years and WWE hadn't changed their minds. The character of Roman Reigns was nowhere near as good as he is today. He felt stale, promos were overly scripted, and some of the booking decisions were just ridiculous. Take the 2017 Royal Rumble for example. Roman had a match for the Universal title against Kevin Owens, which he lost, and then later in the night he entered as the 30th entrant in the Royal Rumble match. But in kayfabe, why would the heel authority who were running things and feuding with Roman allow this? Him coming out as number 30, given his history with Royal Rumble matches, was asking for him to get booed. Good thing he ended up losing to Randy Orton, because if he had won, we might have actually seen the people set the seats on fire in protest. Another example was the awful WrestleMania main event he had with The Undertaker. Although the match being awful had very little to do with Roman and more so Undertaker, who even admitted he was miles off it. Anyone going one-on-one with Taker at WrestleMania isn't getting cheered, especially Roman. To make things worse, Roman won and what it looked like at the time, retired The Undertaker, which was a surefire way to get mega heat. On the Raw after Mania, the opening segment was truly a sight to behold. Roman came out to one of the most hostile reactions I can recall in modern WWE. He stood in the ring and didn't say a word for about 10 minutes as the fans obliterated him. He eventually just said, "This is my yard now," and walked out as the fans absolutely lost the plot and called him every name under the sun. It was incredible. What was more incredible was that after that, Roman was still on the babyface side according to WWE. The rest of 2017 for Roman wasn't too much to write about until his short feud with John Cena post SummerSlam. This featured a great promo battle between them. Then towards the end of the year, and what felt like the only possible way to get Roman cheered, we got a Shield reunion. Roman during this period was a sign of WWE's insistence on knowing what the fans want better than the fans themselves. But moving on, next up is the historic first ever women's Money in the Bank ladder match that was won by a man. Yep, that's right, a decision so stupid and bad that even WWE couldn't ignore it as they redid the same match 2 weeks later on SmackDown. Not only because of the backlash by everyone, but also for years down the line they wanted to have some footage to share of this historic match that doesn't completely embarrass them. The deal was WWE announced at the 2017 Money in the Bank pay-per-view, for the first time ever the women will also have a Money in the Bank ladder match. Among the competitors were Carmella, and you may recall she was paired up with James Ellsworth at the time. This guy, remember him? He accompanied her to the ring and interfered throughout, which was normal. But the controversy came when he actually climbed the ladder, unhooked the briefcase and handed it to Carmella, thus essentially winning the match himself. This made the match and the whole concept of the match look completely pointless. It's still one of the more dumb things they've done in recent years. Makes you wonder which genius in the creative team suggested this, and of course we know who approved it. As mentioned, online backlash was so great that Daniel Bryan, who was SmackDown GM at the time, acknowledged how wrong this was on TV and they redid the match on SmackDown 2 weeks later, which Carmella won again. They did have this great spot where they teased having the same finish. James Ellsworth climbed the ladder, planning to unhook and give the briefcase to Carmella again, but Becky Lynch prevented that this time. Carmella then unhooked and won the Money in the Bank herself this time. They essentially gave us the finish they should have the first time. Carmella winning again made it so obvious that this was just them admitting they gave us a lame finish the first time and wanted to correct it. Next up on this list is a storyline where we find out Kurt Angle has a son on the WWE roster. During 2017, Kurt Angle was Raw GM and running things, and so in May, WWE began this series of teases which started with Corey Graves informing Angle about some scandalous information that was sent to him about him, with Angle saying, "If this is true, it could ruin me." This immediately ignited our curiosity about what this could possibly be. This carried on for weeks and weeks, and then finally in July, Kurt revealed that he just found out that while in college he dated a girl who gave birth to a child after they broke up, and that child was a WWE superstar. Now it was rumoured that it would be one of the members of the tag team American Alpha, Chad Gable, a former Olympian whose in-ring style somewhat mimicked Kurt, and Jason Jordan, another great athlete. And so of these two, it seemed pretty obvious who it would be, right? Yep, Jason Jordan. Kurt emotionally told the story as the crowd gave him the what treatment and eventually revealed that Jason Jordan was his son. This was met by the crowd like a fart in church. Some just found it funny while others were confused and or unimpressed. This ended up doing nothing much for Jason Jordan. The story felt forced and struggled to connect with the audience. It became a source of mockery among fans. Worse still, sometime before this, WWE had actually acknowledged Jason Jordan's real-life dad on TV in the front row during a SmackDown show. Unfortunately, Jason got a serious neck injury in early 2018 that led him to retire from in-ring competition. Apparently, the plan was for Kurt Angle to face him at WrestleMania of that year in his final match in WWE. But the bad booking decisions doesn't end there when looking back at 2017 WWE, as next on this list is Goldberg squashing Kevin Owens to become Universal Champion in 20 seconds. Us WWE fans have forever had this weird relationship with past legends returning as part-timers. We love seeing them come back and giving us some nostalgia, but on the other hand, when they come back and get pushed to the moon at the expense of some of our favourites, that's when the crowd can start turning on them. This has happened a number of times and there are certain ways to do it so that the crowd is more forgiving, but the way WWE booked Goldberg's short run in 2017 wasn't it. After beating Lesnar at the Survivor Series the year prior, it was announced that he would face Lesnar again at the 2017 WrestleMania, which was of course so that Lesnar could get his win back. This would have been just fine, but for some reason WWE wanted the title involved. And so for no credible reason, Goldberg was given a Universal title match against the champ Kevin Owens at Fastlane a month before WrestleMania. As mentioned, at this point KO was getting ready to be in this hot feud with Chris Jericho. He'd been champ for 5 or 6 months and it made sense for this feud to have the title involved. But instead, in the match at Fastlane, Goldberg squashed Owens in 20 seconds and won the title, only to drop it to Lesnar a month later. Another Lesnar title reign at this point was one of the last things we wanted. Amazingly, Kevin Owens has never been world champ since this. Chris Jericho even said he was originally set to face Owens at Mania for the Universal title, but Vince changed his mind. Instead, he faced Owens at Mania in the second match on the card, which was a match apparently Vince hated and called one of the worst he's seen. To be fair, the match wasn't great, and in a documentary, we saw this moment where Owens found out Vince wasn't happy with it.
Absolutely insane, but this was completely unexpected. You talk about shock and awe.
However, I wouldn't go as far to say this was a burial of Kevin Owens, as what was a burial was how WWE handled Rusev in 2017. Despite constantly losing big matches and pretty much every feud he was in, around mid to late 2017 Rusev started getting over organically when he started doing his Rusev Day gimmick, where he declared every day was Rusev Day. Despite being a heel, this started to get over with the fans and he would become way more popular than he'd ever been. And in typical WWE fashion, they would actually start to edit out Rusev Day chants and even limit his TV appearances to suppress this. It was the classic, we didn't want you to get this popular and don't need you to, therefore we're putting an end to this. Instead of capitalizing on this and going with it, Rusev continued to lose whenever he was on TV in any significant match. Another example of fighting the fans to the detriment of the talent. It always amazes me when WWE would do this, intentionally preventing a superstar from getting too popular for their liking. Needless to say, Rusev never did reach these heights again in WWE before getting released in 2020. Now before we get to the ugly of 2017, here's two quick special mentions of things that were just bad. First up, Enzo Amore, remember him, as Cruiserweight Champion and whatever the hell WWE was trying to do with that 205 Live division, remember that? Next is Baron Corbin's Money in the Bank cash-in attempt against Jinder Mahal, which was a major disappointment. At one point it looked like WWE had major plans for him, but apparently not, as Corbin lost in a matter of seconds, making him one of the few to unsuccessfully cash in. This hurt Corbin's credibility and momentum, and it was all downhill from here. And now for the main event, the ugly of 2017 WWE, and boy do a few things stand out right away, and boy were they ugly. Let's start with the Bayley This Is Your Life segment by Alexa Bliss, that kendo stick on a pole match, and this whole feud, all of which was absolutely horrific. Around mid-2017, Bayley and Alexa Bliss were in a feud for the Raw Women's Championship. Now remember, this Bayley was the hugging fangirl babyface that no one could possibly hate, but boy did WWE try to change that. Leading up to one of their matches, Alexa Bliss presented one of the worst segments in modern Raw history. A This Is Your Life segment about Bayley, a segment where Alexa would recount the life of Bayley growing up. The segment was supposed to be some sort of rehash of the This Is Your Life segment Mankind did for The Rock in 1999. The only difference being that that was excellent and this made you want to tear your eyeballs out. The segment was so bad that WWE didn't even bother uploading it to their YouTube channel as they normally would. In the segment, Alexa Bliss completely buried Bayley. She brought out this lady to the ring claiming to be Bayley's schoolteacher, who said Bayley brought her dad to school because she couldn't be away from him for that long, or else she would start crying. She brought out this guy claiming to be Bayley's ex, who said she also brought her dad to any dates they had. He then said that he only dated Bayley to get closer to Bayley's apparent best friend, who was also in the ring. After some more of the worst acting you've ever seen, the two made out, all the while the crowd was chanting, "This is boring." Bayley then finally came out to end this and to beat up Alexa, but failed to even do that as Alexa Bliss left with the upper hand. This went on for like 12 minutes but felt like 12 hours. I dare you guys to go and attempt to watch this in full. The following Sunday, WWE managed to top this in terms of bad booking when the two of them had their big kendo stick on a pole match at Extreme Rules. The stip was anyone who retrieves the kendo stick can legally use it, and so in theory you would think the good girl Bayley, who wouldn't hurt a fly, would finally give in after everything and whip Alexa with the stick and get her revenge. But that didn't happen. Bayley did get the kendo stick, but I guess she forgot how to use it as she hesitated and didn't even end up using it at all. Alexa then whooped her with it and won the match, and at that point it truly felt like Bayley's career was 6 feet under with this booking. This helped absolutely no one, and Bayley deserves so much credit for overcoming this garbage to be where she is today. Years later, Vince even admitted how bad the segment was in a documentary and took all the blame, and rightly so. But moving on, and speaking of things Vince needs to take blame for, next up is that House of Horrors match and the 2017 Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton feud. At the start of the year at the Elimination Chamber, Bray Wyatt finally won the big one. After years of trying and it never happening, he was finally the WWE Champion. The month before, Randy Orton won the Royal Rumble, and so a match between them was likely set for WrestleMania. But at the time, you may recall, Randy was actually a part of the Wyatt family and said he wouldn't face his friend Bray. However, that changed when Randy turned on Bray and set his compound on fire. Yep, that happened. And so the match was set for them to face each other at Mania. And if you were to say this match failed to live up to expectations, that would be a huge understatement. At this point, Bray really needed this title reign to cement himself at the top. Randy was already established and the title wasn't really going to get him any more over, and so of course, barely a month after winning it, Bray lost the match. During the match, however, we saw a first ever in WWE, when apparently Bray used his powers to scare Randy by having maggots, roaches and other insects projected on the mat while the match was happening. This was so goofy and lame and just laughable. You knew Vince was sitting in the back saying how this was such good shit. The two then met again at the pay-per-view Payback a few weeks later, but this time in another first ever, they were in a House of Horrors match. But before this match, Bray Wyatt had been drafted to the Raw brand, and so now his WWE title rematch was now a non-title match. Yep, I know. Anyways, this House of Horrors match was WWE's version of a cinematic match after seeing the success the Hardy's final deletion match had in TNA. This match was a miss. It was split in two parts. The first began in Bray's alleged house where Randy broke in to find himself in a room full of dolls, all the while we had spooky lighting and music in the background. Bray then attacked him and the two fought in the house. This portion of the match ended when Bray dropped a fridge on Randy and then left the house and went to the actual arena the show was happening in. Now we were all supposed to believe that this was happening in real time. The only issue was that this was airing at about 5:30 PM and we were supposed to believe that it was pitch black outside, which it wasn't. Bray arrived at the arena to continue this match and was jumped by Randy after his entrance. They then fought for a few minutes until Randy was jumped by Jinder Mahal and the Singh brothers. Bray then took advantage of this and won the match, ending their feud for the time being. This match was just confusing and failed to deliver. But moving on to the final topic of the video, and speaking of failing to deliver, the last topic is Don't Hinder with Jinder, the failed Jinder Mahal experiment. Jinder had forever been a complete jobber in WWE, never in main events, always treated like a joke and no one to take seriously, and so in April of 2017 it came as a shock when he actually won a 6-man match on SmackDown to become #1 contender for Randy Orton's WWE title. The match was set for Backlash and wasn't all that great, and then came one of the most shocking moments we'd seen that year. Jinder actually won the title thanks to the Singh brothers, and just like that, overnight it seemed like Jinder had gone from a complete jobber no one cared about to being the #1 champion in the whole company. Fans were shocked and really didn't know how to feel, as it wasn't like fans were clamouring to see Jinder get this push, it was just out of the blue. As good as it was to see an Indian WWE champion for the first time, this title reign was terrible. After winning the title, Jinder had a few rematches with Orton which he won. This included the return of the Punjabi prison match at Battleground, which fans and even wrestlers agreed is a terrible match. The match was hindered, no pun intended, by poor visibility for both the live audience and viewers at home. According to the wrestlers, the bamboo cage makes no noise whatsoever and hurts like hell, which is the absolute worst combination. Jinder won the match when the Great Khali made his return and interfered. Jinder then moved on to feud with Shinsuke Nakamura. During this feud came a controversial moment when during one Jinder promo, he was making fun of how Shinsuke looks, said the crowd thinks he looks like Mr. Miyagi, and made fun of how he speaks. After this there was even a "that's too far" chant from the crowd, who were otherwise just sitting on their hands while all this was happening. In a recent interview, Jinder mentioned how he had reservations saying this and knew it would draw backlash from people, but Vince demanded he go ahead with it anyways. As touched on, this terrible reign ended when Lesnar said he didn't want to work with Jinder at Survivor Series. Sometime later we found out that the whole reason this reign even happened was that Vince woke up one day and said we want to expand and tap into the India market. It then felt like he probably would have asked one of his stooges if there's an Indian on the roster. And when they said yes, he would have said great, put the title on him. Along with this, WWE were then planning this big show in India for December of 2017, but the most mind-boggling thing was by the time they got to this show, Jinder had already lost the belt. So the 6-month title reign we all had to suffer through, just so they could grow in India by having an Indian champion, didn't even last an extra month so that the show in India could see the Indian champion. Jinder did appear on the show and lost to Triple H, yep. He was never WWE champion again and got released by WWE earlier this year. Nothing personal against Jinder, but this booking here was shocking to say the least. There were so many other ways they could have made Jinder a legit top guy. But that concludes the ugly side of 2017 WWE and this video. It's also key to mention that around this time, wrestling outside of WWE was really starting to take off. Ring of Honor and New Japan in particular were really starting to gain some real momentum just as WWE was on the downhill. But do let me know what you remember most about WWE in 2017, good or bad. Although 2017 was pretty bad overall, the worst was still to come as covered in my 2018 review. Link below, so be sure to check that out. But anyways, let's be grateful for the WWE we have today. And with that, thanks for watching and I'll catch you on the next one.